Rhea is the current president of our academy. We're very honored to have her. She's been at, Rhea, how long have you been at UIC?
Oh, okay. I started at UIC in 1999, and I've been the senior administrator since 2003.
Wow.
Wow.
Can everyone hear me okay? I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great.
So we'll pass it off. Thanks for being here, Rhea.
Thanks.
Okay, can everyone also see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so Steve is all about time and money, and so I'm going to balance out the session and talk about wellness and safety. So I'm just going to get right into it. So wellness. Wellness is a journey, not a destination. This is a picture I took at in Wyoming. We were on a trail at Purple Mountain. It was really crazy down in the national park, and as soon as we got up, maybe a mile up into the trail, I didn't see another person all day. And so a little bit about me, I love nature. I love going to the national parks. It helps me reset. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a wellness journey right now. So what are we going to talk about today, and what are we going to discuss? Why wellness? So I'm going to try and illustrate and discuss the diversity of occupational factors that affect our wellness, not just our wellness, our faculty's wellness, our staff's wellness, our residents' wellness. I'm going to discuss our role in promoting wellness and strategies to develop a culture of wellness in your workplace. And then I'm going to review some established emergency medicine wellness resources. So why should we focus on wellness? We know depression has increased in our society. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. I've seen it in my shop over the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of people hurting. There's a lot of concern. You know, there are techniques that we can implement to improve our well-being. So it's important to know what they are and how to implement them. As Travis mentioned, I've been at the University of Illinois a long time. I've been in my role in emergency medicine since 2003. As your life phases change, and Steve mentioned this in his talk as well, your work-life balance change and things you need to support your wellness change. So it's important to be thinking about those things. When I first started as the senior administrator, my children were 5 and 7 years old. There were things I needed from my department head, and I negotiated from my department head to help with my balance and well-being at that point in time, which are different from today. So I just want you to be thinking about where you are in your life and what things you need to be well and productive in your work. So in emergency medicine, we have to be thinking about ourselves, and I think it's very important to prioritize yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. We've all heard that. But you also have to be watching your physicians, fellows, residents, the students, our advanced practice providers, our advanced practice students, our nurses, our allied health professionals, and all of your staff, right? Because if you don't stay well, you have stress, you have absenteeism, you have turnover, and we all know how expensive those things are. So what impacts wellness in emergency medicine? There are so many things. And so there are organizational things. There are things in the learning environment for our students and residents that impact their wellness. Our practice environment, where we work, our administrative offices, our emergency department, things in society and culture, personal issues going on in your life, and different rules and regulations and compliance that we have to follow. So, you know, construction workers get a hard hat. What do we get? I'm going to try and guide you and give you some tools so we can improve our wellness as a specialty. So under organizational, what are the organizational things that impact wellness? Poor leadership, when you don't have good leadership, when you don't have good teamwork. Maybe the culture of the organization is not congruent with your values. Steve was talking about productivity-based pay. I mean, you have to work to get paid. Should we be focusing on the productivity, or should we be focusing on the quality of work? Policies, today we're all doing more with less. Since COVID, there's a lot of cuts coming. There's a lot of more anxiety and stress than usual. A lot of people are very worried about their jobs, which impacts their wellness. Our call schedules, our backup, and technology. Technology is a big stressor. And everyone always says, well, you know what, try and be mindful or take a stress management course. And I was thinking, well, those things help with these types of situations. And I don't think they will. So moving into the learning environment, you have to be thinking about the stress and anxiety that our faculty have with the academic promotion expectations. Whether they have good mentors or lack of mentorship, that could impact their wellness. And that also can impact our wellness for that matter. Everyone is working more with less. There's a lot of competition. So I know some of my faculty, they see their peer doing it and they're like, you know, I have to do this, but maybe they can't do it, and that's okay. We've had a lot of curriculum changes in our educational programs that have impacted my faculty, that have impacted my medical students, that have impacted my residents, has caused some confusion, which all lead to extra stress. Think about the medical students who are working in the ER for the first time and exposed to, you know, suffering and stressful patients. You know, all of these things impact all parts of your life. And the list just keeps going on. So then you have the practice requirements, right? The documentation. We have less time with patients. Our professional relationships, diversity inclusion, how we communicate with each other. I don't want to read all of these things. Malpractice risk. I just got a, okay, sorry, I just had a pop-up. And technology. I do want to talk about technology because, you know what, especially working from home recently, I never shut off from work. I'm at work all the time. I'm getting text messages at all hours of the day and emails at all hours of the day. Now I'm expected to answer. One thing I want to talk about is this concept of nature deficit disorder. And I'm not sure if anybody has heard about this concept, but it was a term coined back in 2005 in a book by Richard Louv. I read this book. It's called The Nature Principle. A professor that I know in his class has a college class, and he asked them to read a chapter in this book and then go out into nature and write a paper about the experience. So when they went out into nature, they weren't allowed to bring any technology with them, and they had to spend 45 minutes in a quiet nature place and then write a paper about the experience. And he told me how stressful it was to read those papers because many of the students wrote about how they were anxious because they didn't have their phone and how they felt disconnected spending time in nature. And so there's a lot of body of research that says, you know, this nature deficit disorder, it can lead to obesity, there's higher rates of emotional and physical stress, you have diminished use of your senses, all because we're not spending enough time in nature. So I'm a nature lover, so I love that term. So then you have your factors affecting your personal life, right? You can see here there's 8 dimensions of wellness, and all of these things you need to try to keep in balance. And so it's, as I said in the beginning, you know, at different stages of your career, these things change and your balance changes. So just be aware of that and your support systems. And then we have all of these rules and regulations that we have to deal with every single day. So like I already said, this leads to turnover, your staff being sick, extra stress for you. And so what is your role? And as an administrator, what is your role to promote the wellness of your department? So I'm going to say knowing about wellness isn't enough. You actually have to constantly work at it and put strategies into practice for yourself and those that you work with. I don't know if anybody has taken the Yale course on the science of well-being, but they talk about this G.I. Joe fallacy in that course, like knowing is half the battle. So it's not enough to know. You have to really start to put behaviors into place to change so you can promote wellness in yourself and your staff. I mean, we all say January comes around, we're going to exercise every single day, and it lasts for a week, and then we stop, right? We have to learn what we can put in place to keep those improvements in our lives.
So Rhea, about that last slide, I will tell you that I have gotten in the habit lately, if my employees are emailing me at 9 and 10 at night, I respond to their email and say, why are you emailing me at 10 o'clock at night? To try to get through to them. This is not my expectation. It's not healthy, you know, and try to break that habit.
So many human resource surveys demonstrate that 70% of employees say the most common source of stress is due to their boss. I don't want to be that boss, and I don't think you want to be that boss. So what can we do about that? So I would propose that you develop expertise, you read and learn. So that's half the battle, right? So you know. But make sure you're assessing your staff and you're listening and you're engaged each day. Keep your ear to the ground, be observant, see what people are talking about, see if they're not feeling well, intervene, be a leader and coordinate different things that can impact wellness. So I do yoga. My staff all know that I do yoga. They came to me and they asked me one day, could we do yoga at lunch? And so I said, yeah, sure. So one day a week we started doing yoga at lunch. I had 3 people in my class. I'm not a certified yoga teacher, I just do it for fun. And the word got out that I was doing a free yoga class, and then I had 8 people, and then I had 12 people, and then we had in 2 days. So I mean, it just grew, and people were so appreciative just to have that decompression for a half an hour over lunch. So if there are things that you can lead and help with, that's really important. So these are things we all know, right? An engaged department and happy employees are enthusiastic, and they'll work for you. They'll drive the mission. They're dedicated, which means, you know, the quality of care provided and patient satisfaction scores will go up. You'll have lower turnover, which is better for you, less absenteeism and less errors. And so hospitals that rank in the top 25% of employee engagement levels also score within the top 19% of the highest ranking hospitals for the HCAHPS. So this is really important to promote the wellness of all of your staff and your faculty and students. So I'm going to propose be a transformational leader in your shop to create a vision for wellness. Trust, respect ideas, and promote teamwork. Mentor, manage conflict, and over-communicate. And one of the biggest things on those human resource surveys is inconsistent roles and tasks not being clearly defined. So assign tasks and make sure roles are clearly defined, and be a problem solver. So these things all lead to increased employee engagement and satisfaction, less personal exhaustion, and commitment to work for your department. So don't be a laissez-faire leader or a transactional leader, but be a transformational leader. Passive leaders, which cause problems, ignore issues and avoid conflict. I know a lot of conflict avoiders. Try not to avoid conflict. There are ways to deal with conflict. If you're not comfortable, I would say read and engage and practice working through conflict situations, especially if you're not comfortable doing that. Provide feedback. Don't have a lack of communication. People like to be communicated with, and I try to over communicate things in a very simple manner. Don't be indifferent to performance. Hold people accountable, and don't be a bully. So research shows that passive leaders increase anxiety in your staff and cause burnout and health complaints as well. So strategies to develop a culture in your shop, we've already talked about. Read and learn, engage and listen, and coordinate ongoing efforts to address what's going on in your department. And it's different for each department and each academic center. And we've already talked about these things about being observant, what's working, what's not working. What do you think could be done in the future to make it better? You can ask your staff these questions. I ask them in my staff meetings. Use your employee feedback. If somebody gives you feedback, be sure to use it. People who use their strengths are much more satisfied. So if you can identify strengths in your staff, utilize what they're very strong at, and then they will be more productive and a more satisfied employee for you.
So don't forget to use your strengths. You all know what your top 5 Gallup strengths are. You know, you can use that program with your staff as well. And, you know, when you work from that place of strength, that really is a huge thing. And that's one of the big things I always tried to do to promote wellness.
So, and your staff want you to lead, and they want you to create this culture of wellness. They want to know that it's okay to have balance in their lives. Travis just mentioned, you know, if somebody's emailing you at a crazy hour, you know, say, why are you working? But you have to do that yourself. You have to refrain from crazy overtime. You have to refrain from the weekend emails. You have to take your vacation. I'm forcing myself to take a vacation day. I forced myself on Friday to take a vacation day, and I wound up working half a day. I mean, it's difficult, but you have to just keep trying to do it. And lead by example. So my staff needed permission to do yoga. They felt like they needed permission to do yoga for that 30 minutes. And I'm like, this is your lunch hour. You can do whatever you want. But lead by example. And so give permission to your faculty and staff to make well-being a top priority. And if there are wellness activities, participate in them, because then you're being a role model to your staff. So what are some things that we're doing? We're trying to do some walking meetings. We, before COVID, was working on a renovation for a new administrative office space that did have some standing desks. I was told this morning that's getting put on hold, unfortunately. Use the stairs. We have signs, you know, use the stairs as a reminder by the elevator. I try to show gratitude, thank my employees, especially over the last 3 months. There's been a lot of anxiety with childcare, and when people have to come back to work. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and I see in my employees the stress increasing. So I have a weekly staff meeting. We had it this morning, and I try and thank everyone. You know, everybody's being productive at home. We get some time to interact and see each other, since they haven't seen each other in person since early March. And then, if possible, offer educational options and healthy choices. You know, we have events during the month where people bring in, you know, certain ethnic foods. I have an administrative intern who loves to cook, so she's been doing like a healthy recipe trading program. But there's so many different things that are options, but you have to find out what's right for you and your staff to implement. So remember, stress is good. You know, stress helps us grow, but only if you have time to recharge. So it's important to take that time and recharge. Leaders who promote work-life balance have employees who report higher satisfaction. So those are two very important things to remember. And then I was at a course probably 3 months ago, and they were talking about these personal wellness strategies for yourself. And I like them so much, I'm going to tell you and share with you. So, you know, everyone has times of the day intermittently when their blood boils and crazy things happen. So there's things that you can do anytime, right? You can just like take a moment and do some deep belly breathing. And if you really expand your abdomen, you can feel this relaxation coming through your body. And so that's something you can do at any time. You know, if there's something crazy going on in the moment, so you can inhale and say alert mind, and exhale and say quiet my body. And if you consciously inhale and say alert mind and exhale quiet body, your body starts to naturally relax. We all have things we forget every single day, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you're just like, oh my God, I forgot this, right? So this is this brain overload syndrome. So I do keep a pad and a pen next to my bed, but get it out, just write it down, because as soon as you write it down, it clears your mind. This woman who gave the lecture talked about this specifically when you're in bed in your brain. If you don't have a piece of paper to write it down, she said, just conceptualize in your head a file drawer and sticking that idea in a file drawer and closing the drawer. And she said, if you mentally, when you're half asleep thinking about this, if you do that and sort and store it away, when you wake up in the morning, you will undo the file and it'll come back to you. So if you don't have a piece of paper to write it down, she said to try this and it should work. I tried it once, it did work. And then when you're not at work, make sure you're getting enough physical activity and spending time in nature. And if you have problems sleeping, she actually recommended highly this app, PZIZZ. She said that it's a sleep training app that can help you get enough sleep at night, because we all know how important that is. So I'm going to stop right there just to answer any questions, because the next thing are just some emergency medicine specific wellness resources that I'm just going to breeze through. So does anybody have any questions or discussion they want to talk about?
So I'm curious, you know, I've been at home during all of this COVID and not been working because I left my job right as this started. But, you know, what does wellness look like for those of you who are struggling to do the work from home and to get everything done while you're at home? I changed my background, so this is one of the quilts that I made recently, and that's one of the big things that I do for wellness. This was my daughter's 30th birthday present. But I'm curious what other people are doing and how you're coping with all of this.
So I have one to the point about, you know, Travis's point. I normally am also that supervisor who's like, why am I getting an email from you at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, you know, 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday? I think during this time with COVID, I have a 4-year-old. I have one staff member who has an infant, and the other staff members are single and live on their own. And so we have very different sort of home lives at the moment and different ways of coping with this. I found that it's also been important to be flexible, you know, kind of understanding, like for me, for instance, my husband and I are both home. And so we're switching off childcare during the day. So I basically have a 3-hour block in the middle of the day where I'm available but not working. And so it's been good to just get outside and walk around. But then that means that, you know, I'm working at 6 or 7 in the morning, and then I have some work to do in the evenings and some work during the weekend as well. So I think also setting those expectations with staff members, so that everyone's adjusting and getting the work done, but feeling like they are getting breaks. And sort of to that end too, it was sort of a, you know, question for those of you who have been administrators for a while. I don't always feel like our chair or leaders in the organization sort of align with, you know, what our wellness objectives are. And certainly we've got, you know, younger faculty members coming in, but we've also got, you know, more of a focus on, you know, paternity leave, and even fathers wanting to take some time off. And that doesn't always jive with, you know, traditionally what the department's done. So I'm curious how everyone's navigated that over the years, because it's definitely become much more pronounced during this time with COVID. So, you know, how everyone else has handled that.
This is Rhea. I can talk a little bit about the parental leave, because I've been in emergency medicine since 2003, and I have to say, in the last 5 years, I've seen my first fathers request parental leave, some 2 weeks and some for the full 12 weeks, and we've honored all of those requests, of course, under the Family Medical Leave Act, but it's definitely changed in the last 5 years. I see this coming from the fathers and requesting that time off for balance. And I think that's important. You know, I work at a state institution, and so we're very supportive of people's health and wellness. So I'd be interested to hear from others maybe who don't quite have that support in their institution.
Yeah, and I know at our institution, it's not just, and of course, it's not just emergency doctors that are requesting this sort of thing. So with 2020 being the first year, we now provide 4 paid weeks of paternity leave. So we have 4 weeks of paid paternity leave that's been very well received. And our maternity leave, paid leave, has been increased to 10 weeks. Of course, with FMLA, they can take up to 12, but we will pay them for for 10. And those have been, you know, those, of course, are benefits that are offered in lieu of other things that might otherwise, you know, maybe the institution could provide more retirement matching or something along those lines. But they've been super well received by the faculty.
Okay, well, I'll keep going through some of these resources, and I'm going to just whiz through these because you will get these slides, but the American College of Emergency Physicians, ACEP, they have a website where they promote the well-being of physicians who practice in emergency medicine. So these are all websites where you can go if you have specific issues and search for further information and educate yourself. AAEM, they study burnout of physicians and have ideas to promote wellness and career longevity for their members. SAEM, of course, and just to note, Linda Davis Moon, who is one of our members, is our representative to the SAEM Wellness Committee. So they have a lot of resources as well. CORD has resources for our residents, and EMRA as well for our residents. This is a great website if you haven't seen it. They offer a lot of very useful information, the National Academy of Medicine. I'm not going to go through all of this, but like I said, you can visit this website and they have tremendous amount of resources. And definitely the ENA for the well nurse has a lot of resources as well. And when I start talking about safety, I took some of the information from the ENA because they have a lot of good resources. So then that's my ending of my wellness component, and I was going to transition into safety next, unless there's other questions.
One thing I was going to just point out, and this goes back to what both Rhea and Kirsten said about, sort of doing your part and also playing to your strengths, is finding ways that you can support staff, residents, medical students, faculty, and also sort of use the strengths that you have. For me, a couple of things just as reminders is, one, do your part to destigmatize counseling and the EAP that your organization offers as a free resource to employees, to let people know that there's no shame in using that it's completely anonymous and available to them, and that it can be super helpful, and that most of them I've seen offer resources. I mean, they'll help you write a will, they'll do all kinds of things that you wouldn't even think of. And so really do your part to, so I talk freely with my employees that I've used EAP resources and that I find them very helpful, just to try to do my part there. The other thing I would say that, especially with younger employees, but with all employees, people come from different backgrounds and familial setups, and some of them have not been exposed to, the proper way to plan financially. And we know that finances are, if not the most stressful part for people, they're in the top there. So I do sort of financial courses once a quarter or so, where we talk about things like retirement. We talk about, maximizing a match by your employer for 401k. We talk about, emergency funds, that, how much of your salary should you be striving to save for emergency uses, just to sort of level set everyone, because again, not everyone has the benefit of being brought up in a home where those things were emphasized. And so those are all things that that we can sort of help to be there for our staff. And my staff have really received that very well, I'll say.
Thanks, Travis. Okay, so we're going to shift into safety. COVID, anyone? We're going to talk, I put a couple of COVID slides in. And I'm going to kind of keep the same format here. We're going to illustrate and discuss some occupational safety risk factors. I'm going to share some safety statistics specific to emergency medicine, talk about some best practices for risk reduction and being prepared, and then once again at the end just give you some resources. Okay, so COVID really put a wrench into our staff and patients' safety. The majority of my physicians came down with COVID in March, before we knew this was really a big problem. Once we implemented across the board universal masking for both providers and patients, we had a graph and you could see it. We were like, our staff and doctors were all getting COVID, and as soon as they did that, the line went down. So I just wanted to go over some safety things that we did at our university for COVID specifically, and I'm sure most of your shops did the same thing. We restricted visitors to keep everyone safe. That was a big stressor for a lot of patients. That was a big stressor for a lot of family members. We did have a donation of iPads specifically for our patients, so they could communicate virtually with their families when the patients were in the hospital and they couldn't allow the family to come in, which was very successful. We did the universal masking and temperature screening checkpoints to enter the hospital each day. As of yesterday, our research building is about 25% capacity started, because they're doing, our research building is opening in waves, but they started a checkpoint. So what we have to do as of yesterday, if we're going onto campus, we have to go on and fill out an online form. It's a health assessment. We have to bring that form in. You have to get verified for the day, and then you get a wristband that you've been approved to work in the building that day. And you have to do that each day when you go into campus starting yesterday. The hospital has had that all along, but the campus just started to reopen yesterday. We started doing COVID testing and the rapid point of care testing to try and, of course we treat everyone like they have COVID, but the rapid testing has really helped us. We've set up PPE guidelines for different type of staff members and where they need to be. And we also did staff antibody testing for all of our staff in the hospital. So I was wondering here, since COVID is, here right now, if there are other things other universities are doing to keep both their staff and patients safe that I did not highlight here.
So I think one of the things that we've been working on this week is just as we start to think about what it means to come back whenever that is, what that will look like and how we do it safely and how we stagger people. We've been going through conference rooms and marking spots where people can sit. And so if it's a conference room of 12 or 16 people, we can have 3 safe seats in that conference room where everyone is spaced at least 6 feet apart. Making sure that cubicles are spaced out and just sort of going through step by step and thinking through all of the what ifs and the space planning components.
And speaking of that, we're struggling right now with our volume in the emergency department. So I think you all know nationally the volume decreased. Our volume in our ER dropped 50% in April. We've bounced back a little bit, but we're still down about 30 or 35%. But I'm concerned about like our waiting room. I think if you put people 6 feet apart in my waiting room, I think my waiting room can hold 12 people. So for right now, it's okay, but we're struggling with what we're going to do as our volume starts to increase.
Yeah, and we can't exactly place patients in the hallways anymore.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about safety. So this is the Emergency Nursing Association's guidelines and principles on safety. Healthy work environments promote safety and positive patient outcomes. We all know that violence can and does happen anywhere, of course, when you least expect it. Any act of violence needs to be addressed. So this is like conflict avoiding behavior again. You can't avoid it. If there's an act of violence, especially in the emergency department, whether it's a patient, a family, or a colleague, it has to be addressed. The ENA recommends that a multidisciplinary team is needed to address workplace violence, and everyone in the organization should be accountable for upholding behavior standards. So this is an interesting equation that I like. It's from the World Health Organization. It's a risk equation, right? So it's saying that, I had to pop up again. Risk is a function of the hazards to which we are exposed times the vulnerabilities of the situation, but risk can be modified by our level of preparedness. So it's important to be prepared, and then your risk will decrease. And we'll talk a little bit more about this moving forward. So in the emergency department, what are our occupational safety risk factors? We have patient risk factors, we have environmental risk factors, and we have organizational risk factors. And so our patient risk factors, of course, our patients who abuse drugs and alcohol have higher risk factors if they have a psychiatric background, if they're a member of a gang, and have a history of violence. So these are risk factors that we see every day in our emergency department, and we just need to be aware of that. So we have environmental risk factors. We all know about the long waiting time and how overcrowded our ERs were prior to COVID. That will come back, I have no doubt about that. So maybe our risk might be low right now, but it should be coming back. We have uncomfortable waiting rooms when people are sick. Some places have lack of security. I know on occasions we have lack of security. Our providers sometimes are working alone in a patient room, which puts somebody at risk. We could have poorly lit hallways and rooms. And also, you know, I work in an older building. So our physical plant is not very conducive to being a safe physical plant. So you have to be aware of your workplace design and thinking about risk for safety. And then there are organizational risk factors. So how do we communicate in an emergency situation? Are we prepared for that? Do we have staff shortages? So if we have low staff, the risk could go higher. Are our staff trained appropriately? And does everyone know the policies for managing violent patients and visitors? Going back to everything, workplace violence must be addressed. So think about some of these statistics. So healthcare workers are 4 times more likely to be assaulted and require time away from work due to workplace violence than all other workers in the private sector. That's huge. The majority of the violent acts are committed by patients, but visitors also do account for a significant number as well. And the most common are pushing, grabbing, verbal threats. 80% happen in the patient's room, and most happen at night. So this was the emergency department statistics from an ACEP, Emergency Nurse Association survey. So 50% of ED physicians report being assaulted. 70% of ED nurses report being hit or kicked. Those are really unfortunate statistics. The last data I could find was from a 2018 survey that 7 in 10 ED physicians say that violence is increasing. Of course, it harms patient care. Not everyone is reporting it. Hardly anybody is pressing charges. And half say that hospitals need to be doing more with security cameras, metal detectors, and visitor screening. And so I put the link down here for the ACEP Violence in the Emergency Department resources, so you can review that later. So what is risk reduction? So risk reduction is a measure taken to prevent a hazard from creating risk. So, you know, you need to be prepared. You can increase awareness, security, and that should decrease our vulnerability. And that goes back to that equation that I talked about earlier. And then what is being prepared? That's any activity with the goal of managing and bringing relief to a situation. So you have to have plans, you have to think ahead, you have to train your staff, you have to measure, you have to monitor, are the things you're doing working? Do things need to be changed? And once again, these things change by institution, so you have to do your personal assessment in your shop. So what do you need to do? You need to know your emergency department history, the incidents of violence, and processes that could impact the violence that you're seeing in your shop. There's a lot of things that you can be doing to recognize the signs of potential violence in the emergency department. There are many situational awareness courses that you can take. There are many de-escalation technique classes that you can go to. You can practice and simulate different types of situations, and I'm sure some of your hospitals are doing those types of things. We've partnered with our security department. Just having them present is a deterrent. I'd say 5 years ago, we didn't even have a security guard in our waiting room or in our ED for that matter. We would have to call. So right now we do have a presence in our waiting room. They should be clearly visible because they are a deterrent.
Rhea, does your security walk with providers after their shift to their car? So what we find is if we have like a, shift that ends at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., a lot of the providers or residents or, will be a little nervous to walk back by themselves. Is that something that you all do?
Yeah, I'm gonna, in a couple of slides, I'm gonna share our UIC app that we have. And I put a link to it so you can see, actually on our campus, you can do a virtual walk with a police officer, or you can call a police officer to the ER to walk. This is for all over campus, so I'll share that in a minute.
Sorry.
But consider your physical plant design, right? You need to be able to see what's going on in the emergency department. And like I said, some of our physical plant setups are from 40, 50, 60 years ago. So you have to be thinking about your physical plant design. You want to restrict movement of the public, maybe down specific corridors. You don't want people congregating. You want to design your waiting areas to assist patients who may have a delay, which is hard to do when we all have space issues. There, in that ASAP guideline, there's a lot of physical plant suggestions about installing these counters with glass or on an incline so the patient can't lean up against it. So your reception and clerk are farther away because you don't want people to leap over if they get anxious or violent, and make sure there's adequate lighting. So you have to be thinking about the pros and cons. I know many emergency departments have metal detectors, but you have to balance out, access of your patients versus screening through the metal detectors. And I would love to hear from those that have metal detectors what they think about that. I do not have that, but you need to be thinking about like that queuing line, who's running the medical detectors, the cost of the personnel. Others I know are using metal detector wands. Is anybody on the call familiar or using any of these types of things? Okay. Make sure you're engaging your employees who are working in the emergency department to provide ideas. I know my APNs who work up in the front are always giving me different types of suggestions for ideas that will reduce risk. It's important to have a zero tolerance framework. People need to be accountable to reports. They have to do the incident reports. We've installed panic buttons in our emergency department. We do not have closed circuit video, but I do know some emergency departments that do, and talk about it in huddles. Sometimes we talk about the situations in our huddles on what's going on, and we also get some great ideas from those huddles. Consider your staffing patterns. Be wary of people working alone. And of course, we always try to minimize our patient waiting time, but sometimes we just can't do that. We do all have repeat offenders. We do flag charts of high-risk patients. So those providers taking care of those patients know that they have a history of being violent in our emergency department. So leadership, we need to encourage our employees to discuss workplace violence. It is an issue. I'm sorry for the next typo, which should be communicate. Once again, overly communicate, show mutual respect and active listening, because the staff working there are on the front line. So I always listen to them and I respect their ideas and the things that they tell me. And of course, we all do ongoing training for safety. De-escalation is huge for all of the staff in the emergency department, and conflict resolution. So these are things, again, we've already talked about in the beginning, that I read and learn. I know my university and community resources. I engage and listen. I coordinate as an administrator the efforts to address workplace violence, and I would suggest that as an administrator, you be the champion for ensuring safety in your emergency department. This is the personal app that I wanted to share with you. It's UIC Safe, so we get text message alerts from here, especially last week when there was a demonstration. We knew exactly when it was going to be planned and where it was going to be because you got a text message from UI Safe. You can have a virtual walk with a friend. So there's a button where if you didn't want a virtual walk with the police, you can connect to a friend, and so your friend can track you and make sure that you get to your car okay, and then you can click the button when you're in your car. So this app has a lot of different safety features. I don't know if any of your institutions have something like this. They implemented this about 1.5 years ago, so I wanted to give you the link in case you found this useful or you could bring it back to your shop. As far as resources, I'm just going to flip through some of these resources. You can go look at these at your leisure. This No Silence on ED Violence was launched back in 2019. There's a lot of resources on that page that you can go and review. And as well, the ASAP Joint Commission has a lot of de-escalation information, as well as OSHA and the Emergency Nursing Association. So then if we have time, I just wanted to have open discussion about sharing examples of any safety concerns and what your organizations are doing to promote best practices in this area.
Hi, I joined late. Thank you for that. That was really great. We're redoing our front end right now for safety. So you touched on a lot of the information that we're working on right now, which is really helpful. One thing that we're starting to talk on, given all of what's going on in the world right now, is bystander training. And so I was curious if anybody has resources for that. Some of our diversity leads are taking a training, but it's not until the fall because of COVID. They were supposed to be this spring and then they all got canceled. And so we're really looking for resources on that if anybody has any. But I think your presentation, will this be sent out to the group? Okay, perfect. So that a lot of it is really, really helpful and pertinent. So thank you.
Could you clarify what you mean by bystander training?
Yeah, it's bystander training for like if you witness racism, harassment, challenging conversations, really building up toolkits around that so that when you're in the situation, you're prepared. And so we're starting to think about, simulations around that and holding sessions. But if something's already developed, it would be lovely to have resources.
So I can let you know, actually, I have a conference call with our Vice Provost for Diversity next week about, just the most recent discussions going on with everything with George Floyd. And there are so many feelings and emotions that we wanted to get some resources from our diversity group to see if we could bring in some training experts. But also, I've been getting a lot of my faculty sending me like leaders in emergency medicine who talk about these things. So I can put that together.
That'd be wonderful.
Rhea, I love the app. I definitely am going to take that back to our leadership. That's incredible.
We unfortunately had a couple of bad events on campus that spurred that. And it's been very successful, so yes.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for putting all this together. Was there another question? Sorry.
No, it's just Kirsten. I was just gonna...
Oh, just you. Okay.
just me, just piping with a few things. So thank you, Rhea, very much for a very informative talk. I think you really touched on a lot of things that are really relevant to us in emergency medicine and the current situation that we are in. I just want to remind everybody that next Tuesday, we will be back here again at the same time. We were going to have a panel on academic medical centers with 3 experts who have been at a variety of different places. So I think that will be really informative. And then we have Mac Howell from Vanderbilt, who is going to be talking about some EM data analytics. Travis and I have planned some things for our final session, but we really want it to be what you guys want. So if you have any questions, things burning on your mind, please, please, please send them to us. One of the things that we were planning to do was a talk about and a discussion about implicit bias. We had, before the March session, asked everybody to take the Harvard implicit bias assessment, at least one of them. If you haven't done that yet, or you need the link, just let me know and I can send it back out to everybody. It's quick, it's informative, and it's just kind of a little bit of pre-work for that session. But please, if you have other questions, there's other things going on in your shop, other things that you want to discuss, let us know, because we want to make that last session a really bang up last session that helps you as much as we can.
And try to get it to us this week if you can, so that if we're not experts on the matter, we can bring in some people who are.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks to our colleagues at SAM for being here to do all of this.